In this video lecture, we will explore the circumstances and events surrounding the second invasion of Greece, and that invasion will be led by the successor of Darius, and that is his son Xerxes. So it is Xerxes' invasion of Greece that fills much of all of Book 7 and Book 8 of Herodotus' histories. And in many ways, the battle that we'll look at in this particular lecture, the Battle at Thermopylae, the way Herodotus depicts this particular battle, it is amongst the most Homeric of his writings. Homeric in the sense that the Greeks will be presented as very similar to the heroes of old. Certainly the Spartan king Leonidas will be depicted as a very Homeric hero, and the epic bravery displayed by the Spartans has in many ways traveled a long and far path down to this very day. Some of you may be familiar with the movie 300 that was released several years ago, and of course that movie was quite a blockbuster. And much of it, although based on a graphic novel by Frank Miller, Miller took much of his dialogue from Herodotus' Book 7. And so we'll take a look at Book 7 now as we get into this lecture. So we last left off with the Greeks believing that perhaps Marathon would end the conflict between Greek and Persian, and that maybe the Persians had been taught a lesson. But of course, that's a fool's game that the Greeks were playing. The king Darius, shortly after he gets word of the defeat of his forces at Marathon, Darius begins to put together a larger and more extensive invasion expedition that he will launch against Greece. But Darius will be prevented from carrying out this invasion when he dies in 486 BCE, so 4 years after the Battle of Marathon is fought. Now, as you would expect, the royal succession would mean that the son of Darius, young Xerxes, is now becomes great king. And Xerxes had every intention of picking up where his father had left off. He felt it was important to avenge the loss of Persian honor, and he decided that he would launch an invasion of Greece to punish the Greeks, certainly the Athenians. And this initial attempt is frustrated, though, when Darius dies. Two of the satrapies or provinces of the Persian Empire, Egypt here and Babylon here, they go into open revolt against the rule of the great king, and it takes some time to quell these rebellions. Now, it's an interesting depiction that Herodotus portrays of the great king. Again, he's a young king. Xerxes is young when he takes the throne, and he is the first of the great kings to come to the throne without living the kind of vigorous and active campaigning existence of his predecessors. When we look at Cyrus and Cambyses and Darius himself, these were all men who had been forged in the crucible of combat. Xerxes grew up at court, at the royal court, and with all the benefits that will bring, and so he's out of touch with the reality of conflict, and he also expresses some hesitation as to whether or not to go through with the invasion. There is a more or less a kind of a debate that goes on through Xerxes' two key advisors. Both are older relatives of his. Both are obviously Persian nobles, and one of his advisors says, "Yeah, you gotta go through with this invasion, and you gotta have to avenge Persian honor. And by the way, remember." It is your duty to expand the holdings of the Persian Empire. That is the duty of every great king. Putting down rebellions in Egypt and Babylon does not expand the borders of the empire, and therefore, there's very little glory in that. However, if you should conquer these stubborn, pesky Greeks, then you will have fulfilled your obligations to expand Persian power. The other one of Xerxes' Persian advisors, however, urges caution and reminds Xerxes that his father, Darius, had gotten into a bit of a difficulty, actually major difficulty, by attempting to expand westward the Persian Empire when Darius had invaded Scythia and had experienced a defeat at the hand of the Scythians. So, the other advisor tells Xerxes to be cautious. And so there's some back and forth here to basically influence the young man. And ultimately, though, Xerxes decides to go ahead with the invasion. Now, this invasion would be no joke. It was going to be a full-on affair, and Xerxes marshaled the entire military might of the vast Persian Empire. The plan seems to have been to carry out a land-sea invasion of the Greek mainland. And of course, you get this graphic here, which indicates, massive amounts of Persian warriors marching, skirting the coast of the Aegean, first into Thrace and then down into Macedonia, and the plan was to come into northern Greece and then ultimately to reach Athens and burn the city to the ground. Now, shadowing the land force was going to be a massive Persian fleet that would support logistically and also militarily, because it was known that the Greeks did have some ships. So you don't want Greek ships landing in the rear of your force and causing problems that way. So the Persian fleet would prevent that from happening. Now, Herodotus gives us some numbers that are not accurate. Historians agree on that. He talks about over 2 million ground troops and over 1,200 ships being involved in this invasion. Again, we can scale that back quite a bit by a factor of 10 for the land force, where we see maybe a little around 250,000 warriors, which is, again, certainly the largest land force that anybody had ever seen up to that point. And that land force would be shadowed by about 700 ships. Now, along the way, along the journey, we get a glimpse into Xerxes' character via Herodotus, and of course Herodotus never met Xerxes, so there's a little bit of perhaps projection here. We see two instances in particular in which the arrogance, the pride, the dangerous pride, which the Greeks refer to as hubris, that Xerxes displays this hubris in two cases. First, in offenses that he commits against nature. And he does this by ordering, first of all, I guess chronologically, a canal to be cut through the Mount Athos Peninsula. And here on my map, you see in green, the green line would indicate the route supposedly taken by Xerxes' army, and the other green line in the sea here representing the naval force that's shadowing. Well, earlier, about a decade earlier, a Persian fleet had been destroyed off the coast, off the tip here of Mount Athos. It was in a notoriously dangerous stretch of water, very stormy. And Xerxes, and this gives you some indication of just how serious he's taking this invasion, he doesn't want to take a chance on anything disrupting his fleet. So he orders a canal to be cut through the base of Mount Athos to provide a more sheltered way for his fleet to descend from the north into the south towards Greece. And this, again, can be considered a type of hubris. I mean, if the gods wanted a canal to be cut through Mount Athos, they would have put one there. It is not up to man to make these type of changes, of alterations to the earth. So that is Xerxes' first offense against nature. The second offense occurs when the land army is marching northward and reaches the Hellespont, this narrow channel of water. Xerxes orders the Hellespont, which is about a mile-wide channel of water, to be bridged. And Herodotus depicts this as another violation against nature. And to compound this particular violation, when a storm destroys this first bridge that is being built, it is a bridge made out of pontoon boats. A storm will destroy the first bridge. Xerxes actually orders the water, the Hellespont, to be whipped, and fetters or shackles to be thrown into the Hellespont, symbolically, basically arresting the Hellespont. So again, you get this sense of hubris and quite frankly, not quite rational behavior by a great king who thinks, I guess to use today's parlance, he is all that in a bag of chips. So that is again two of the offenses that are committed by Xerxes against nature. The third offense that Herodotus describes in some detail, if I refer to my bottom bullet here, has to refer to a Lydian nobleman named Pythios, who was thought to be the richest man in the world. And remember, Lydia was one of these, the area here that the Persians had conquered, and the Lydians had become subject peoples. Well, there was a Lydian named Pythios who had earlier agreed to finance the entire invasion of Greece. He wanted to turn his fortune over to the great king Xerxes. And Xerxes says, no, thanks, I'm fine. Unfortunately, Pythios thought that this initial act of generosity would buy him some influence, and so one day he goes to Xerxes while the army is on the march and asks Xerxes if one of his 5 sons, the eldest of his 5 sons, could be spared from a military campaign. Pythios is okay with sending 4 out of 5 of his sons, but he wants his eldest son, who will succeed him, to remain safely behind. And Xerxes becomes absolutely enraged by this. He considers this an act of disloyalty and a lack of faith that the expedition will succeed. And basically says, you know what, Pythios, take your 4 younger sons and go home. And then he takes the poor, unfortunate eldest son, and Xerxes orders this young man to be cut in half. And each of the halves of the body are going to be placed on either side of this bridge of boats on the European side of the Hellespont, so that the army, when it crosses into Europe, one of the first things it sees is this kind of grim reminder of the power of the great king and what happens to those who displease him. So these are 2 interesting cases, and it really does set up Xerxes' character as a young man who doesn't have very much experience in the affairs upon which he has embarked, i.e. military affairs, and he also can be rather petty and arrogant, and this is the adversary that the Greeks are going to be facing. And who knows what'll happen if this guy ever takes control of Greece. So it really does create a sense of tension and suspense, and really makes the stakes seem incredibly high. And now we are left to wonder, will the Greeks ever be able to halt and throw back this juggernaut that is descending upon them? And so with the canal being cut through Mount Athos and the bridge of boats crossing the Hellespont, Xerxes' vast invasion force can now have an unimpeded, uninhibited access way into Greece. And also another factor I should mention is the fact that many Greek states and those out on the outer fringe of the Greek world, including Macedon, they will what's called Medize. They will submit to Persian rule by offering the tokens of earth and water to the great king. And they will agree that they will supply his army, and they certainly won't fight against the Persians. And some Greek states will actually supply contingents to the great king, because they either were fearful or they had an ancient grudge against Athens. So that is another factor that the resisting Greeks are going to have to contend with. So let's take a look at these resisting Greeks, and of course the two dominant poleis, Sparta and Athens, ultimately will find a way to put aside their differences and work together, and they will take on the mantle of leadership in this resistance movement. But there will be an improbable sequence of events that will have to take place first before the Greeks can organize themselves. And we'll take a look first at the Athenians. And I should point out that after Marathon and the massive upset victory that the Athenians will pull away against the Persians, the Athenians will, many of them I should say, will be confirmed in their assumption that Athenian military power should always be based on the hoplite phalanx. And this, of course, will elevate the status of not only those men who fought and died at Marathon. Here you see what's called the Soros at Marathon. This is the burial mound that contains the remains of those Greeks who fell in that battle. But by extension, all of the hoplite class will see a significant boost in their status. And this will become problematic when you want to take into account that massive fleet that the Persians are bringing with them. If the Greeks don't have enough naval assets to somehow contend with that, yes, perhaps Greek hoplites will be more than a match for any of the Persian warriors or warriors of the Persian Empire that they will come up against. But again, the naval component here could be very problematic for the Greeks. And fortunately, though, for the Greeks, they have an Athenian named Themistocles, who seems to have had a great deal of foresight in anticipating the nature of the threat and realizing that for Athens, hoplites will only take you so far, and you will have to have some sort of naval component to deal with any future threat, certainly from the Persians. And Themistocles, very interesting character. Some consider him the greatest statesman in all of Western civilization for his efforts in not only anticipating the threat, but taking measures to defeat that threat. And he's got a tough challenge here because, again, as I mentioned, many Athenians are complacent, and you certainly have the hoplite class that doesn't want to think about investing anything in a naval expansion. And people think that we're going to be okay here. Well, Themistocles, though, is adamant, and he is a crafty enough politician to ultimately steer Athens on a course of naval power that will determine that will, I should say, be the basis for Athenian power for almost 75 years. But it won't be an easy task. But fortunately, again, talk about an improbable event in 483. So while Great King Xerxes is assembling his vast army and is cutting a canal through the base of the Mount Athos Peninsula, and the lights are all blinking red, the Athenians strike silver. They strike a rich vein of silver in the state-run mines, the polis-controlled mines at Laurium. Evidently, these mines were believed to have been about tapped out, but they decided to give it one more go to see if the mine truly is exhausted. And with this final attempt, they strike the richest. It was the mother lode. They strike the richest vein of silver that Laurium had ever produced. So now the debate is over. Okay, what do we do with this money? It is a state-run mine. So what are we going to do with it? And there is this epic type of debate that occurs between Themistocles, who is a proponent of an expansion of naval power, and a guy named Aristides, who was called Aristides the Just. And he was from the upper middle class, and again, he was one of these guys that was rather complacent and felt that hoplites can handle any emergency. And so there is this debate between the two, and ultimately, Themistocles is able to gain the support of the poorer group. Remember, the lowest of the four classes of Solon's categories, grouped by wealth, were called the Thetes. And the Thetes, of course, could vote in the assembly. After hearing a debate on different positions, they could ultimately cast their vote. And Themistocles will gain the support of the Thetes, who were very numerous indeed. The poor always tend to be that type of volatile swing vote, and there are many of them. And Themistocles will gain their support by reminding them that, look, if the ships are built, okay, and I'm talking now about at least 100 ships. Some sources say as many as 200 ships were envisioned. But if 100 ships are built, you're going to need rowers. Okay, at least 170 rowers per ship. You guys can do the math. These rowers are not going to be slaves. Okay, contrary to what pop culture has us believe in movies, old school movies like Ben-Hur and things like that. The rowers on these type of ships were all citizens, and they were all paid a wage. So Themistocles says, here's the deal. You can listen to my opponent, Aristides, who wants to divide up the silver evenly, and we all get a cut. Okay, and that'll get you a temporary boost in your income. Or you can follow my position and delay gratification for a while. We'll build the ships, and then guess what? You're going to get jobs. And those jobs are going to pay you not just a one-off income here, but a regular income that you can rely upon, that you can build a life on. And ultimately, it is going to be Themistocles' naval plan that will be approved by the assembly, thanks to the support of the numerous Thetes. And later on, though, Themistocles realizes that Aristides is going to be an obstructionist, so he orchestrates the ostracism of Aristides, who has to remove himself from Athens for 10 years. So you get a sense in this little episode here that Themistocles really is a very, very shrewd political operator, and that he can use on a tactical level to get what he wants done. But in the broad strategic sense, he knows exactly what needs to be done. And that is a rare combination amongst political figures, this ability to think locally, but also think globally. And so, of course, Athens will then begin with this silver to build itself a fleet. And the type of ships that we're looking at are called triremes. And again, the sources differ as to whether or not it'll be 100 ships or 200 ships, but we can be certain that this represents a major expansion of Athenian naval power. And the trireme itself, as I mentioned, is going to be crewed by 170 rowers, and it's called trireme, three banks, because of the three banks of rowers that will appear. And I'll show you some pictures here from the replica, the recreation that was commissioned by the Greek government, and they took all sorts of archaeological evidence and tried to recreate as best they could an ancient trireme. And the chief weapon system, if you will, of a trireme is the ram on the front of the ship, the prow of the ship. And the idea was, with these 170 rowers rowing in unison, you would build up enough speed to either shear off the oars of your opponent's ship or puncture the hull of the opponent's ship below the waterline and then cause it to sink. But this required a great deal of teamwork, every bit as great a deal of teamwork as you might imagine that a Greek phalanx would take to operate. And here you see the close quarters involved in rowing one of these triremes. Again, the three banks of rowers. You have the lowest rank here, and the middle rank, and above them is another bank of rowers. And again, it becomes key to row in unison as a team to build up the speed necessary to turn your trireme into basically a guided missile. And if we pan out a little bit, this is the Olympias. This is the ship that was recreated based on the best available archaeological evidence. And it was quite a formidable craft. And over time, the Athenians will become renowned as masters of the sea. But this is that Genesis moment, that moment where Athens, thanks to Themistocles, is turning away from a land power as being the basis for Athenian strength towards the sea. And this is going to be a sort of an evolutionary process that will occur, but we are now in that founding moment. Okay, now back to the invasion, and you see this map that I've shown you earlier. And as the Persians continue their march, it is said that with the vast numbers, they drank rivers dry. And fortunately, again, because of some of the northern Greek states, the northern Greek poleis, that had Medes, that had gone over the Persians, supply, which could have been a very, very difficult problem to contend with for the Persians. Logistics is always difficult, but in the ancient period it was especially difficult. But thanks to the treachery of the other Greeks, the way is now clear for the Persians to enter that area known as Greece, that the Greeks considered part of the Greek world, and begin moving southward. Now, accompanying the Persians is going to be a kind of a key advisor that exemplifies this type of Medizing, what we would consider treacherous behavior that many of the Greeks, an alarmingly high number of Greeks, will commit. And accompanying Xerxes as a key advisor is Demaratus, who was one of the two kings of Sparta. But when he and the other king get into a big feud, Demaratus is forced to leave Sparta. He actually leaves on his own volition because he feels like he's been humiliated, and he seeks to reestablish himself someday. So he seeks sanctuary at the court of the Persian king, and Xerxes recognizes that this guy could be useful as a source of intelligence, and so he decides to bring Demaratus along with, I'm sure, promises that Demaratus will be reestablished as a type of puppet king when Greece is made into a province of the Persian Empire. Now, back in Greece, the Spartans have taken something of an initiative to bring together those Greek states, those Greek city-states that do want to resist the Persians. And it's no surprise that it would be the Spartans that would take the lead on this, because Sparta recognized that it was preeminent militarily in the Greek world, and if leadership was necessary, it would be the Spartans that would have to supply it. So the Spartans will initiate and ultimately succeed in forming an alliance of 31 Greek poleis. This alliance will be called the Hellenic League. The Greeks refer to themselves as Hellenes, and so thus the Hellenic League. Now, it is interesting and a bit unfortunate to note that this number of 31 city-states represents only a tiny fraction of the total. But of course, many Greek city-states, out of reasons of their own self-interest, chose to remain neutral or chose to Medize, that is, go over to the Persians. So with this core group, though, of 31 poleis, the Spartans take on the mantle of leadership and decide on a strategy of a northern defense. And this is one of those key moments because many of the members of the Hellenic League thought that perhaps Spartans would decide to forego the rest of Greece and simply defend the Peloponnese, their own home base, their own peninsula. But the Spartans recognized that sometimes it's better to fight the enemy when they are further away than when they're in your own backyard. So the Spartans do agree and decide to lead a what we would call a forward defense well to the north of the Peloponnese. Now, of course, in preparation for the forming of any military plans, the oracle at Delphi had to be consulted. This was a standard policy in which the representative parties would send a delegation to Delphi to ask the god Apollo for advice, for guidance. And it was through the Pythia. Here you see a French painting of the priestess, the Pythia of Apollo, who sat on a bronze tripod and would utter some, well, to us it would seem as gibberish, and that gibberish would be translated by the priests who were on hand to transcribe what they thought she was saying. And oftentimes these oracles were very ambiguous and were open to interpretation. Well, in this case, it's pretty clear-cut. The response that the Spartan delegation gets when asked about how they should go about resisting the Persians. And here you can see the text that Herodotus has provided to us. Hear your fate, O dwellers in Sparta. Either your famed great town must be sacked, or the whole of Lacedaemon shall mourn the death of a king of the house of Heracles. Now, the Spartan kings, indeed the Spartans themselves, were thought to be descended from a group that sometime during the early phase of the Dark Age entered the Peloponnese. This group was called the Sons of Heracles because they themselves were thought to be descended directly from Heracles, the great hero and god of the Greek pantheon. And so the Spartan kings, anyway, were thought to be, in a roundabout way, descended from Heracles. So this is relatively cut and dry. Either Sparta will be sacked by the Persians, or a Spartan king will die, has to die. So the king at the time, probably the more forward-thinking king in this regard, was Leonidas, and he decides that it is a necessary sacrifice, even if it is his own life that must be given. So Leonidas will, with this knowledge that he probably won't be coming back from this particular mission, Leonidas will gather about him his personal bodyguard of 300 homoioi, those full Spartiates, who the requirement was they had already had to have at least one son. And this is another indication that it's not only Leonidas who is not coming back, because the idea is that it is okay for a Spartan warrior to die, going into a tough situation, if he has somebody to replace him back home. So this is another telltale clue that the Spartans who accompanied Leonidas figured that they probably were not coming back. But it's important to note that this was meant to be an advanced force. This was going to be a force made up of 300 homoioi, about 900 helots, 1,000 periakoi, those dwellers around who lived in Sparta and its environs, but who were not in low status like the helots. And there were probably about 2,000 other Peloponnesians that had decided to join with the Spartans. So there would be 4,000 representing the Peloponnese who would embark on this northern march. And in green here, I can't resist the pointing out the attitude of the wives and mothers who would be saying goodbye to these warriors. And the Greek historian Plutarch has a number of sayings of the Spartan women that he collected in a what we would call a book today. And this is amongst the most prominent, this idea that Spartan women, when they were saying goodbye to their sons, to their brothers, to their husbands, they would say to them, with it or on it, meaning, come back with your shield or on it. And this, again, represents this idea that the Spartan warrior should come back successful in victory, still living, or carried by his comrades on his shield, his bloody corpse, a testament to his own bravery. So, again, these are the psychological and physical preparations that this particular force is dealing with. And there was some debate over just how far north a northern defense should be. And initially it was decided to take a force of about 10,000 collected Greeks, not just from the Peloponnese, but again made up of members of hoplites from these 31 city-states of the Hellenic League, and move far north, north of Thessaly, to an area called Tempe, where there was a pass, sort of a choke point, that it was thought Xerxes' vast army could be held up. But unfortunately, this pass could be flanked. There was another way around it. So the force, some of it disperses, but some of it decides to retreat. And that's where this force will meet up with the force marching north from the Peloponnese, led by Leonidas. And they will meet at the Hot Gates, the pass at Thermopylae. And it's also important to note, now that I have this map up, that the Athenians and other naval contingents were going to secure the Spartan flank, the ocean flank, with a naval force, and that force would ultimately fight against Xerxes' navy, a number of naval engagements, while the land battle is being conducted. So the Greeks are again firing on all cylinders, in the sense of mobilizing their ground assets, mobilizing their naval assets, in with a level of cooperation that had never been seen before. You'd have to go back to the Homeric invasion of Troy, with the vast expedition force that the Greeks were able to gather and mount against the city-state of Troy, which is over here. So this does represent kind of a big deal. And it is the last best hope that the Greeks will have to turn away this invasion and this threat to their freedom. So I can begin to scope a little closer into the terrain that the Greeks will be defending. And the pass at Thermopylae was a notorious choke point. It's a very narrow pass, and initially the Greeks thought that there was no way to flank it, and unfortunately that turns out to be their Achilles heel, if you will, because there is a way around it, around Mount Kaliadromus, which is the high mountain that gobbles up a lot of the space all the way to the sea. The shaded area here in the inset photo presents the high ground of Mount Kaliadromos, and as you get towards the Gulf of Melis, you probably have room for maybe 2 carts moving side by side to get through the narrow pass. So it can be blocked. And again, with this force in place, the idea was to hold up the Persian advance, and perhaps the other Greeks would gather together reinforcements and turn this into the termination point of the Persian invasion. Now, this bottom photo, just to give you again a visual image, is Thermopylae today. The bottom photo, this is Mount Kaliadromos, and the sea has receded. So this is now open land, much wider than existed at the time of the battle. Now, for a kind of a CGI rendering of what the terrain looked like at the time of the battle, we look at this top photo, this top image, and again Mount Kaliadromos, and here's the sea, and you have, this is at its widest. This was a very small part of the pass. The rest of it was much narrower than this. And so by late August of 480 BCE, the two sides have reached a proximity to one another, and Xerxes, of course, has been informed by his scouts that there is a group of Greeks that looks as if they are intent on obstructing his further progress. And this causes the Persians to pause for a moment to ponder this. I mean, how can any sane person willingly choose to stand up to this juggernaut? And it is a curiosity to Xerxes, and he actually asked Demaratus about this. Remember Demaratus, the exiled Spartan king. He asked Demaratus, what manner of man is this who is willing to, obstruct this great force set against them? And Demaratus basically replies that, the Greeks worship no king. They will bow down before no master, no king, but they are a slave to their laws. And this is especially so of the Spartans. And if a Spartan force has been told to defend a chunk of turf, then they will defend until the death. This is exactly what Leonidas and the Greeks are intent on doing. Certainly the Spartans, who we get a feeling are resigned to their fate and are determined to make a further Persian advance as costly as possible. And there is another story, there are quite a few stories told by Herodotus, as the two sides confront one another. There's about a 4-day waiting period where each side kind of warily looks at the other and waits for something to happen. So there's already 4 days that are ticking by, and I might point out that time is of the essence. These defenders are waiting for reinforcements. The rest of the Greeks have to get their act together further south to determine what plan B is if this particular plan fails. So every day does matter. And this is in many ways the value of the Spartan sacrifice. It buys the rest of the Greeks time. So during this 4-day pause, while the two sides look at one another and confront one another, there is a story Herodotus tells about Xerxes sending scouts to see what the Spartans are up to, and the scouts creep towards the Spartan position, and they notice that the Spartans are combing their hair. And they report this back to Xerxes, and Xerxes, of course, finds this curious. And once again, he summons Demaratus, who informs Xerxes that this is an age-old custom of the Spartans to comb their hair and neaten their overall appearance in preparation for a death struggle. So Demaratus tells Xerxes, these guys are dead serious. If they're combing their hair, they are preparing to die. So given this, then the battle can begin. There is a one final effort to get the Greeks to, from Xerxes' viewpoint, to see reason and move along. A messenger is sent and it tells the Greeks to give up their weapons, and it is said that Leonidas, the Spartan king, replies, "Molan labe, come and get them." And with that refusal, that final refusal, the battle is on. And of course, as the battle commences, we might imagine the Persians, who have tens of thousands of archers at their disposal, will indeed prep the battle space, if you will, by launching their arrows. And this, of course, gives the Spartan Dionysus, when he is told that how many archers the Spartans have and that their arrows will block out the sun, Dionysus responds in typical Spartan fashion, then, that's good, we'll have our battle in the shade then. But all of this gallows humor cannot hide the fact that the Spartans and the other Greeks, the thousands of other Greeks who are defending the pass, have a very grim task before them to hold back the Persian force. They do give a good account of themselves. For 2 days, the battle is a stalemate. Herodotus reports that the Greeks kill a huge number of Persians who are attempting to more or less steamroll their way through, but the Spartans and the other Greeks are not budging from the pass. So these frontal assaults are very costly to the Persians. The hoplite phalanx is tailor-made for such a conflict, and so there is a frustration factor that is building in the Persian camp. And it could have perhaps caused a change in Persian plan, except for the ever-present threat of treachery once again raises its head in the form of a shepherd, a local shepherd named Ephialtes, who decides, for various motivations, probably to enrich himself or ingratiate himself with the Persians. Ephialtes shows the Persians a path by which the Spartan and Greek position in the pass at Thermopylae can be flanked. And here this image gives you some idea of the path going up Mount Kaliadromos and then down around into the pass itself behind the Spartan position. And on the third day, this is the case. The Persians move a force by night along this pathway, and as the sun breaks, the Spartans and the remaining Greeks find themselves outflanked and surrounded. Now, Leonidas had gotten word prior to dawn that the Persians were involved in a flanking maneuver, and he will actually order many of the remaining Greek defenders to disperse, to retreat before they are entirely cut off. But Leonidas and the remaining homoioi Spartan warriors and about 1,900 other Greeks volunteer to stay and put up the best resistance that they can. And so on the famous third day of the battle, Herodotus paints what happens in Homeric terms, in the sense that these heroes against insurmountable odds go down fighting. And the high point of the battle on the third day is when Leonidas himself is killed. There is an epic battle over the recovery of his body. Indeed, this was a feature of Homeric combat, that when a hero had fallen, his comrades would move heaven and earth to recover that body. And Herodotus reports that that's exactly what Leonidas' Spartan comrades did. They did recover the body, but shortly thereafter, they are all killed. Despite, as Herodotus reports, they're fighting with, when their spears broke, they fought first with swords, and then with rocks, and then finally with teeth. So a very tenacious defense all the way to the very end. And the Greeks themselves recognized that although this was a defeat, indeed, it can be considered a catastrophic defeat, potentially catastrophic, because now the Persian advance into southern Greece, into the Attic Peninsula and Athens itself, is free and open. But there was a sense immediately following news that the Spartans had all been killed, that something special had happened here. That these were a band of warriors who had given their all to defend something larger than themselves. And later, when it came time to commemorate their sacrifice, the poet Simonides is enlisted to write a suitable inscription to commemorate the bravery and the sacrifice of the Spartans. And here you see what he has come up with to inscribe on the monument. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to the laws, we lie.